In 1955, Japan saw soap rationing and a 400% surge in cleaning product ads. Yet in quiet corners, grandmothers held fast to rituals most of us have never seen. These techniques were nearly erased by migration, marketing, and time. Why have these 15 ancestral methods, from chemical-free rice water to meditative cloth rituals, become almost invisible outside a dwindling generation? The consequences reach beyond clean floors. They reveal what is lost when a culture trades mindful ingenuity for convenience. The answers begin here. A grandmother's hands, worn yet steady, move across a faded wooden table. Each motion carries a quiet intention, shaped by beliefs older than memory. In homes like hers, cleaning is more than a daily task. It is a kind of prayer. The wisdom behind these gestures is rooted in ideas that shaped Japanese life long before modern products and advertising. Wabi-sabi finds beauty in the uneven grain of wood, the gentle wear of a favorite cup. It teaches that imperfection is not a flaw, but a sign of life well lived. Motainai whispers that nothing should go to waste, not a scrap of cloth, not a drop of rice water. Even the smallest resource is treated with respect, repurposed again and again. Ma, the art of empty space, guides the arrangement of every room. It is not just what fills a home, but what is left open and uncluttered that brings peace to the mind. The rhythm of sweeping, the careful folding of a cloth, the slow rinsing of a dish, each action creates order, not just on surfaces, but within the heart. Underlying it all is Shinto's sense of hari, the act of purification. Dust and disorder are seen as forms of spiritual impurity, or kegare. Through cleaning, grandmothers quietly restore harmony, inviting good fortune into the home. These philosophies are not abstract. They live in the way tools are handled, in the attention given to corners and crevices, in the silence that often accompanies the work. The result is a home that feels settled, alive, and cared for. A place where every object, no matter how humble, is honored. In the gentle persistence of these habits, the spirit of a generation endures, offering a vision of cleanliness that is as much about the soul as the floor beneath one's feet. Advertising budgets for household cleaners in Japan multiplied rapidly after 1955, as magazine ad pages for soaps and detergents quadrupled by 1980. In the pages of Shufu no Tomo and similar women's magazines, the number of cleaner ads per issue rose from a handful in the late 1950s to hundreds annually by the 1970s. These ads promised brighter whites, sanitized kitchens, and modern efficiency, often showing smiling mothers wielding shiny new products. Behind the glossy slogans lay a coordinated push by companies like Cow and Lion, who released synthetic detergents and new glass cleaners alongside relentless marketing. Dentsu and Hakuhodo, Japan's leading ad agencies, crafted campaigns that linked cleanliness to scientific progress and modern womanhood. The message was clear. Traditional methods were old-fashioned, even unsanitary, compared to the promise of chemical innovation. Official records from the Ministry of Internal Affairs show a parallel demographic change. Between 1955 and 1970, nearly 10 million people left rural villages for city life, with migration peaking in 1970. By that year, urban households made up 72% of the population, and rural farm homes had dropped by 40%. This shift fractured the generational chain. Grandmothers who once taught cleaning wisdom to daughters now found their families split between city apartments and distant countryside. Curriculum records tell a similar story. In 1968, home economics textbooks revised by the Ministry of Education dropped entire chapters on folk cleaning, replacing them with sections on synthetic detergents and time-saving appliances. The old lessons, how to fold a furoshiki for dusting, how to save rice water for stains, vanished from the official record almost overnight. The disappearance was not just cultural, but documented. Ad counts, textbook changes, and migration charts all point to a transformation engineered as much by market forces as by the march of time. The paper trail, though incomplete, hints at a deliberate erasure, leaving only scattered memories and silent gestures in the hands of aging grandmothers. A grandmother reaches for a bowl of cloudy rice water, the liquid left after rinsing a day's grains. In kitchens like hers, nothing is wasted, not even the starchy runoff. She pours it onto a stained wooden counter, letting the enzymes and fine rice particles go to work. Chemists today know that these microscopic starch granules act as gentle abrasives, lifting grease and binding dirt without scratching delicate surfaces. There is no precise recipe, just intuition handed down through years of practice. After a few minutes, she wipes the counter clean with a soft cotton cloth, revealing a subtle shine. Nearby, a glass bottle of rice vinegar sits ready. Its sharp scent is unmistakable, a natural acid with an acidity of around 2.5. Before synthetic sprays, vinegar was the standard for dissolving mineral deposits and cutting through kitchen grime. Grandmothers mix it with warm water to mop floors or soak glassware, trusting its acidity to disinfect and brighten. For stubborn mold and damp corners, some turn to bamboo vinegar, a byproduct of charcoal making, rich in organic acids and phenolic compounds. Laboratory tests confirm that these phenols, present at up to about 1%, can suppress the growth of bacteria and mold. A cloth dipped in bamboo vinegar leaves bathroom tiles fresh, the faint aroma lingering only a moment. Rice bran, another kitchen staple, is never thrown away. When milled finely, often to particles smaller than a grain of sand, it becomes a gentle, scouring powder. The bran's mineral-rich fragments polish pots, pans, and even lacquerware, restoring luster while avoiding scratches. Some grandmothers burn rice husks or bran to create an alkaline ash, then mix it with water to clean greasy pans. The fine ash, rich in silica and potassium, behaves like a primitive soap, breaking down oils with surprising efficiency. For windows and mirrors, newsprint is the tool of choice. A crumpled sheet of yesterday's newspaper with its tightly bound wood pulp fibers and embedded mineral fillers polishes glass to a streak-free finish. The fibers, measuring about 20 to 30 micrometers across, gently lift away moisture and residue without leaving lint. Unlike modern towels, newsprint contains no softeners or synthetic coatings, so windows dry, clear, and bright. Each method is simple, low cost, and born from necessity. These habits are more than folk wisdom. They are practical chemistry, refined over generations. In the hands of urban elders, they become acts of quiet ingenuity, offering a measured alternative to the endless cycle of products and packaging. The science is subtle, but the results are visible in every polished surface, every gleaming pane of glass, every corner free of mold. What endures is not just cleanliness, but an ethic of making do, guided by the rhythms of kitchen and home. A cast-iron kettle rattles softly as steam escapes, filling the kitchen with the scent of yuzu peel and green tea. In rural Japan, grandmothers begin their day by simmering water in a tetsubin, dropping in citrus peels or shiso sprigs. As the vapor drifts through the house, limonene from the citrus disperses at just over 60 degrees Celsius, its aroma settling into wood and tatami. The steam is more than fragrant. Volatile oils work quietly, neutralizing mustiness and airborne bacteria, blending with the slow rhythm of daily cleaning. Dried tea leaves, saved from the morning brew, are scattered across tatami mats. Their polyphenols bind to odors and dust, and as the leaves are swept up, they take with them what would otherwise linger deep in the weave. The process is quiet, almost ritualistic. In corners and under sinks, leftover tea leaves absorb dampness and mask the scent of cooking oil. Polyphenols, studied for their natural deodorizing action, turn a simple sweep into a subtle act of purification, echoing traditions as old as the tea ceremony itself. After meals, citrus peels, mandarin, and yuzu are set aside. Rubbed along wooden counters or tucked into cloth pouches, their oils cut through grease, leaving a fresh trace. Limonene, most active when warmed, makes these peels ideal for wiping down surfaces after a pot of tea or a midday meal. Some peels end up in bathwater, their oils floating on the surface, releasing fragrance with the rising steam. A faded furoshiki cloth, folded with care, becomes a cleaning tool. When layered and dampened, its cotton fibers trap microdust that slips past ordinary rags. Each fold reveals a new clean surface, the geometry of the cloth ensuring dust is absorbed, not just moved. Grandmothers refold as they go, shaped by necessity and the quiet satisfaction of a job done well. In room corners, a dish of salt sits undisturbed. Salt's hygroscopic nature draws moisture from the air, reducing dampness that can lead to mold or musty smells. Replaced each month, sometimes sprinkled across thresholds and swept away, salt becomes both a practical tool and a simple ritual. These gestures, repeated season after season, transform cleaning into a multisensory act of care, where well-being is measured in scent, touch, and the quiet presence of intention. A zoken cloth sewn from old towels glides across the floor in slow, circular strokes. Each movement is measured, almost like a massage, coaxing oils in the wood to rise and replenish the surface. Grandmothers learn to adjust their pressure, light for tatami and firmer for hardwood, so the grain stays nourished, never stripped. This is not scrubbing, but a kind of conversation between hand and floor, guided by decades of memory. The cloth is rinsed in cool water, wrung out, and folded again, ready for another pass. The ritual ends with the cloth hung in sunlight, where ultraviolet rays quietly destroy any lingering mites or bacteria. Studies show that 2 hours in direct sun is enough to neutralize most dust mites, a fact grandmothers trusted long before science confirmed it. Sweeping is never hurried. The broom, often made from bound grasses, moves in a gentle, rhythmic arc, gathering dust without stirring it into the air. The pace allows the mind to settle, the body to move with intention. Younger learners watching from the doorway sometimes try to imitate the pattern: sweep, pause, sweep, always in line with the boards. The result is less wear on floors and fewer airborne particles, a precision learned by observation, not instruction. Futons are carried outside, draped over railings or bamboo poles. Morning sun and mountain wind do more than refresh the fabric. Ultraviolet light penetrates the cotton, killing mites and drying out hidden moisture that could harbor mold. Grandmothers tap the futon with a wooden beater, sending invisible dust into the breeze. The bedding is left until late afternoon, then folded and returned indoors, crisp and warm from the sun. In the kitchen, there is a quiet ritual for rinsing cleaning cloths. Each is washed in running water, squeezed until clear, and then snapped sharply to release any last particles. The act is repeated 3 times, a rhythm that ensures no soap or residue remains. This habit, passed on through demonstration, reduces bacteria and keeps cloths fresh without bleach or synthetic softeners. For wooden surfaces that have lost their luster, camellia oil comes out in a small bottle. A few drops on a soft cloth, worked into the wood in slow circles, restore the natural sheen. Chemically, camellia oil's lipids match those found in Japanese hardwoods, replenishing the surface without clogging pores. The process is unhurried, more like caring for skin than cleaning furniture. Over time, the wood deepens in color and softness, a record of every careful hand that has tended it. These habits are not just about cleanliness. The motions themselves become a kind of technology, refined through repetition, each gesture preserving the home and the body that moves within it. For the younger generation, learning these rhythms is an inheritance, one measured not in products, but in the quiet mastery of motion and maintenance. A steel tray sits on the counter, its surface prepped for a controlled test. 5 grams of vegetable oil are measured to the gram and spread evenly across a glass panel, enough to mimic the stubborn kitchen grime that builds up over time. The panel is marked and set alongside a timer, ready for each cleaning method to be judged by the second. On the side, a gloss meter waits to record any change in shine, while a waste tray stands ready to catch every scrap of cloth, every drop of water, and every trace of residue. The rice water solution is poured into a shallow dish. Its pH hovers close to neutral, neither acidic nor alkaline, a point confirmed by a simple strip test. This neutrality matters because harsh chemicals can etch or dull surfaces, but the rice water promises a gentler touch. The cotton cloth is folded, dipped, and wrung out to a precise dampness, then set aside for the first pass. Every step is tracked. The amount of solution used is measured before and after. The waste produced, from used cloths to rinse water, is weighed, ensuring nothing escapes scrutiny. No plastic bottles, No disposable wipes, just the cloth, the rice water, and the oil to be removed. Each method is tested under identical conditions. Same soil load, same pressure, same number of strokes. The gloss meter is pressed to the clean surface, recording any improvement in luster. Results are logged, not interpreted. The process is slow, deliberate, and transparent, allowing the evidence to stand on its own. In this quiet laboratory, the wisdom of grandmothers meets the rigor of modern measurement. Every variable controlled, every result recorded. The gloss meter beeps, and the number flashes on the screen, 5 points higher than before. A simple bowl of rice water, a folded cloth, and the method passed quietly from grandmother to granddaughter have outperformed expectations. The surface shines, not with the glare of chemicals, but with a gentle, even luster. The test panel, once streaked with oil, now reflects the light as if newly polished. No plastic bottles, no disposable wipes, just a cloth rinsed and hung to dry. The waste tray holds nothing but a damp rag and a few drops of water, evidence of a process that leaves almost no trace behind. In living rooms and kitchens across Japan, these results echo far beyond the laboratory. Online videos of elderly women cleaning with these same habits have drawn millions of viewers, one series alone topping 20 million views. The fascination is not just with spotless surfaces, but with the quiet confidence of hands that have cleaned for a lifetime. Younger viewers leave comments in every language, marveling at the calm and clarity in each measured gesture. For a generation raised on convenience and single-use products, the sight of a grandmother folding her cloth, nodding silently at a job well done, feels both foreign and strangely familiar. The numbers on the meter offer proof, but the real impact is harder to measure. These habits save water, avoid plastic, and leave no chemical residue. Yet their greatest value may lie in the knowledge itself, a wisdom at risk of vanishing as elders grow older and families drift apart. In a world searching for sustainable answers, the quiet rituals of Japan's grandmothers hold lessons worth learning before they disappear. Today, Japan imports over $4 billion in cleaning products annually, yet the rituals of intention and simplicity endure in quiet homes. As convenience eclipses tradition, we risk forgetting that cleaning can be mindful care, not just maintenance. In a world chasing efficiency, these habits remind us sometimes the most lasting transformations begin with the smallest, most intentional acts. What old wisdom still shapes your home?